Hi, guys, and welcome to the last presentation of video lectures this year. I know you guys are all devastated and probably want to watch them all summer. I am talking about the 1990s, specifically the era of Bill Clinton, and also a major change in the United States and the world, and that is the continued globalization of the world's economy. All right, so Clinton is what is known as a new Democrat. All right, and that's a really important key here. If you get anything, a short answer on Clinton. What that means is socially liberal, economically conservative. He was seen as being a very middle of the road conservative in terms of economic policy. And you'll see that from some of the results that he had in the 1990s, which was called the peace dividend. All right. The other interesting thing that happened in his first election is you had a third party candidate, the most successful third party candidate since Teddy Roosevelt, a gentleman by the name of Ross Perot, a billionaire running for office. Imagine that. And he was this anti government, anti Washington candidate, something that is going to still be seen in our politics even today. But this starts in the early 90s. And again, especially in 1992 election, you start seeing this trend. As you can see with the third party candidate, Clinton won the Electoral College fairly comfortably during this time period. And he was running against an incumbent. All right. During his first term, a couple things that are out there. Number one, universal health care. This has been a continuing theme. This is not something new just in your lifetime. It actually wanted to go into effect during the Truman administration after World War II, which is when a lot of other countries in the world got universal health care. It actually goes as far back as President Wilson after World War One. He put his wife, Hillary Clinton, in charge of it. But it could not pass the Republican Congress in 1994. And obviously, we kind of get there with the Affordable Care Act in 2010, but we're still not a true universal health care. We still have people that are uninsured in this country. In terms of gays in the military, he had this very horrible policy: don't ask, don't tell. In other words, you couldn't be asked about your sexual orientation, but if you told, you could still be kicked out of the military. This was very unpopular, and it has been since repealed. A big one, it seems like, is the FLMA Act, which gives people time off without losing their job. If they have children, both males and females can take advantage of this. Unfortunately, in comparison to most other countries that give paid time off to have children, we are still seriously behind the rest of the world when it comes to time off for families. And then finally, a big thing with kind of a local connection, the Brady handgun bill. James Brady had been the spokesman for Ronald Reagan and was shot during Reagan's assassination attempt. Also, your local police chief, who just retired recently, was one of the guys that took a bullet for President Reagan. And Clinton got rid of handguns without a 5-day waiting period. Unfortunately, as you know today, all too often, now we have guns that are much worse than handguns that probably need to be taken out of circulation. All right, this led to the 1994, excuse the typo there, congressional elections, some of the most important congressional elections in recent history. There was a backlash. Again, this started with Ross Perot. There's this anti-government backlash, and a Republican congressman by the name of Newt Gingrich came up with this very simple plan of a contract with America. He basically made congressional elections kind of almost a national election. The Republicans took control of the House and the Senate combined for the first time since just post World War II. And this kind of started, and this own personal opinion, started this kind of lack of compromise between the two major parties in this country. Gingrich did not believe in compromise. He either believed in right or wrong. And this has led to obviously some problems with American politics. This is a takeoff of what happened with Nixon and Johnson and the breakdown in trust with government with the Vietnam War, and it just continued into the 1990s. You also had people forget about the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, 169 dead. This was a case of domestic terrorism. A white supremacist, Timothy McVeigh, did this, and domestic terrorism has only gotten worse. There have been a lot more lives lost to domestic terrorism than foreign terrorism in this country. And then I mentioned to the Clinton's economic policies. You can see that Clinton actually had a budget surplus. Yes, a budget surplus for 3 straight years at the end of his term. And you can see he had a shrinking budget gap in the early parts of his term. He is the only president since Richard Nixon who had a balanced budget for 1 year that had a surplus and actually started paying down the national debt. As you can see, it went in the opposite direction and has been going in the wrong direction since the Clinton years. Some people call this the peace dividend after the end of the Cold War. All right, his foreign policy, there's not much there. The Cold War had ended, and what happened is a lot of things in foreign policy since the Cold War has been simmering tensions that exploded after the two superpowers were basically gone. And one of the cases was the former Yugoslavia, which had been held under a communist government, but as you can see, split up into 5 different countries. There was a lot of killing in this, especially Serbians killing Bosnians. The picture there on the right is the city of Sarajevo, which was completely destroyed in 1994. Another worrying trend is the Cold War ended. And so you think a lot of people were like, okay, cool, we've stepped back from the nuclear brink. However, India and Pakistan both get nuclear weapons in the 1990s. And more recently, North Korea has gotten nuclear weapons in the present. And this is probably at some level making the world more dangerous rather than less dangerous, although there are less overall nuclear warheads in the world than there were back in the highlights of the Cold War. All right. Obviously, one of the things that always comes up with Bill Clinton, and if you get something on a test, especially a cartoon, there's a good chance it will be about impeachment. Obviously, impeachment has been in the news a lot recently, also, this is again a beginning of every president since Clinton. Now, there's always been this threat like we need to impeach them, we need to impeach them, and there's a very high bar to impeach a president. You have to actually break laws or break the laws of the Constitution. So unfortunately, some of these have been politically motivated. And you can see a cartoon there off to the side that kind of makes a commentary on impeachment from recent news back to the 1990s. All right. The world explodes in the 1990s, and the key to this should not be a surprise to you guys, is technology. You've got a ton of these new tech companies. It was called the tech boom of the 1990s. You've got Microsoft, you've got Apple, and you even had a couple of up-and-comers in the late 90s, a couple of small companies called Google and Amazon. I don't think they'll ever really amount to anything, but who knows? You also had competition to the United States. The United States is losing their percentage of the world economy because you have things like the Eurozone, which connects together 20 different countries. And they come up with a common currency. Common currencies throughout history have not been successful. So far, the euro has been around now for about 20 years. Remains to be seen if it will continue to be around. But more importantly, the Eurozone combined, which is mostly European countries, obviously, basically has a similar population to the United States, and the total GDP of the Eurozone matches the United States, which gives it a definite competitive edge against the United States in terms of working together as a single trade zone. Also wealth, because of technology and because of the peace dividend from the Cold War and the budget surpluses, exploded in the United States. That's that chart down at the bottom. The number of $1 million households in this country exploded. You'll see it will go back down after the crash in 2000, but as you can see, it's been slowly on the rise up through 2008 when we had another economic crash. But that has continued to increase dramatically since the early 1990s. And this leads to a gigantic global economy. As you can see, obviously, and I don't have to tell you guys, the World Wide Web. By the way, that's what WWW stands for. I'm always amazed that so many people don't know that. Completely changes the way business is done. I remember the debates in the late 90s. People were like, well, this is just a fad. It's not really going to take off. And now you've obviously got companies like Amazon where, many people completely do their shopping on Amazon and don't go to stores, especially with the pandemic going on right now. You still have the power of the G8, which are the countries represented up there at the top. They still represent 66% of the total economy in the world. However, in 2000, you start to see that challenged by what were known as the BRICS countries. Notice that Russia is put into both categories. They're part of the G8. They've actually been kicked out recently. It's now the G7. And the BRICS countries are considered to be the up and coming. The one that obviously pays attention to is China. And China has now regained its rank as the second largest economy in the world, only to the United States. And some people say that it will pass us in total within the next 10 years. However, it won't be a per capita total, it will be an overall total. You've got these major, powerful international organizations that were created in the 1990s, the World Trade Organization, which was to look over global trade, and the International Monetary Fund. Again, I don't have to tell you guys, it's a very smaller world today with technology. And I'm always surprised how many of you don't even know because you guys grew up with these. But iPhones have only been around since 2008. It's a very short time frame in which iPhones have been out, and this concept that we kind of carry a Library of Alexandria in our pocket everywhere we go. All right, and finally, we've got what did the country look like in 2000? All right, what does America look like? And again, we should look at what it looks like today in 2021. But this year, I think that the course is going to end in 2001. Number one, you still see at the top corner there kind of the Sun Belt migration. Those darker states are states where the population is increasing. And you notice the old Northeast is where the population is leaving from. All right. Illinois is still increasing in population, but you still have the Northeast is the one that is losing the population to the South. You also have what is called the graying of America. This is an important concept, especially for you guys, because of what it will mean for policy, especially things like Social Security. The baby boom generation are retiring. The number of people over the age of 65 is increasing dramatically. And they believe that at some point in the near future, there'll be needed to be two American workers. There'll be two retired workers for every one American worker that is currently working. And that's a trend that could cause problems. Japan has had issues with this problem. At the same time, you can see that in order to offset the natural decline in population in the United States, immigration has kind of taken its place. You can see in the 1990s, immigration hit its peak during the third wave. It has tailed off after the 1990s, but we are still at the end of what is still the third wave of immigration. And as you can see, the major wave here is Mexico, Asia, and other Latin American countries. Some people, and I think you're seeing the backlash to this right now, the nativist backlash to this, whereas in some states, minorities combined are the majority of the population. California is a perfect example of this now. So you also see a disturbing trend of a rise in children not living in two-parent homes. Divorce actually went down in the 1990s. It hit its high in the mid-80s. But unfortunately, children living in a single-parent home continue to rise. Home ownership exploded in the 1990s, hitting a peak in 2005, but has crashed since 2005, as you can see from the chart. However, real GDP per capita wealth has increased tremendously since the 1990s. Unfortunately, when you do per capita, you're also taking into the very rich, which can skew those averages, as you can see here, because that bottom chart there can show you 50% of all Americans own barely 1% of the wealth. And as you can see, those top two, 10% of all Americans own over 55% of all the wealth. You guys live in a very wealthy area. And many of your families are probably in that top 10%, but you have to realize there's many parts of this country that are part of that very small red sliver down there at the bottom of that graph. And then, most importantly, guys, is the importance of college. College attendance exploded, college degrees exploded this time. And you can see there's a reason. Unemployment, every time unemployment goes up, it's non college graduates that get hit the hardest by unemployment. You can see over time the constant dollars that college graduates will continually go up, whereas high school graduates only will tail off. And then, most importantly, you can see throughout their career, college graduates have a much better method of earning money than do high school graduates. It still pays to go to college, even with the cost of college. One thing that I would point out for women is notice the gap between female college graduates and male college graduates. Girls, that's a fight that you should and must continue to fight during your lifetimes. All right. So that's kind of a snapshot of the United States in 2000. And it's been a pleasure doing these video lectures, but I can't wait for live again. Take care, guys.